Hi, good morning. I am Michael Chevy Castranova. I'm the business editor at the Gazette. Welcome to our first business breakfast panel of 2021. Today's topic, how do we rebuild workforce hiring and retention? And that's a topic, hiring and retention, we cover every year. We've been doing these for a number of years. Every year we do a panel on this. We have done it at our annual Iowa Ideas Conference that we have in the fall. It's like Christmas and taxes. We're talking about hiring and retention. And then we had 2020, a 12-month stretch that seemed more like 36, 42 months. And that was, I don't need to tell you, that was challenging for all of us. So this morning, we're gonna take stock. We're gonna see what we can see going forward and chat with our really smart panelists we have here today. To see what guidance they can offer us going forward. Before we launch into our discussion, we have with us this morning from our sponsor, Bergen KDV, Chad Greenlee, and he's going to talk to us for a bit. Chad, your turn.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. My name's Chad Greenlee. I'm the market leader for Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. On the call as well, we have Nicole Mead. She's our market sales leader. We're really excited to partner with the Gazette this year on this and bring you this series. Workforce hiring and retention has been such a hot topic for us internally, as well as the vast majority of our clients. Through the numerous payroll software solutions and ERP consultations we've engaged on, we found the need to think of workforce management, climate, just really in a few different ways. And Michael, if you think about it in the panel we have today, those three ways really are, the employee-employer onboarding. How electronic are you? Are you close to 100% paperless? Really important. Your technology stack, the employee retention. Do your employees have the tools and the speed to do the job? And then, the last one is accessibility. What does the employee experience look and feel like, as you look to rebuild? At Bergen KDV, we're really proud here to partner and help everyone on this call have access to these important topics and these great panelists. So this topic couldn't be more important, and the topics throughout the rest of this year. With that, Michael, I'm going to turn it back over to you and this illustrious panel that you've assembled today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for that. I also want to mention this morning, our community partners, Nuboco and Corridor Careers, local jobs with the national reach. So now to our panel. For those of you watching live, you can submit questions. There's that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you put your question in there. As I understand it, that's going to go to Sharon, who's going to parse it. She's going to send it through to Chelsea, who is then going to put it up on my screen. So please participate. This, of course, also is being recorded, so there will be people who will be watching it later on today. All right, so to our panelists. I'm going to go around the screen as I see people. If you would introduce yourself, tell us your title, where you work, and just kind of generally what you do there. Bethany, you're my first to my left.
Good morning, everyone. Bethany Wilcoxon, Senior Advisor at McClure. We're a traditional civil engineering firm, but I lead our community development team. So we get to work with communities all over the state of Iowa and the adjacent states to really enhance quality of life. That can take a number of forms. So looking forward to diving into that a little bit more this morning.
Okay, thank you. Claudia, you're to my right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claudia Schabel, President and CEO of Schabel Solutions. We are a strategic partner to organizations that really want to build inclusive workplaces for all talent and diverse backgrounds. So we reside here in Des Moines. We serve the whole state of Iowa and beyond. And thank you for having me, Michael. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thanks, Claudia. John, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you having me for this illustrious indeed panel. And we look forward to the day when we get back to the Cedar Rapids Library and do these things in person. We think that's happening in short order. So I'm president and CEO of the Iowa Bankers Association, which is a fancy title for being a servant leader to bankers around the state of Iowa. We have about 300 banks, most community banks in our state, that serve Iowa communities in many different ways. And we are a part of helping them do that in an effective manner and advancing overall the state of Iowa. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, John. Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Glass. I'm after a 20-year career in human resources for a number of different organizations mostly around the corridor, and in some leadership positions. I now do consulting. So I'm with my own company of Glass People Solutions, where I do executive coaching and strategic HR management for a number of clients. And I also teach at the University of Iowa Tippie College of Business and at Cornell College as an adjunct professor, where I teach HR classes as well as strategic management and organizational behavior classes. So then my third kind of part-time job is I'm also a 27-year member of the National Guard. So I kind of piece all those together, and that keeps me busy.
You do that in your spare time, right?
Yes, yeah, all those free weekends that I used to have. Right?
Ryan, and by the way, Ryan, I just saw a news release pop up on my screen over here. So why don't you tell us who you are and what that's about?
Yeah, good timing. Thank you, Michael, for having me on. I appreciate to be able to be on the panel with all these folks and hear what they have to say. So I'm Ryan West. I'm with Iowa Workforce Development. I'm the deputy director. And my job really is business engagement and legislative liaison. And certainly legislation's been interesting this year without being able to be over in the Capitol all the time. But we have a lot of stuff. We're immersed in this as well. So excited to hear what everybody's thoughts are. I was telling the group before, we actually just released a press release. So this is perfect timing, Michael. We're actually launching a podcast with Iowa Workforce Development. It's called Mission Employable. It's kind of a play on Mission Impossible. And when you hear it, you'll get the point. And it's all about workforce and all of the opportunities. We'll cover things such as needs for jobs, high demand careers, childcare, transportation, anything under the sun to help people get engaged in a workforce or a career path. And so we're very excited about it. Episodes will drop or release, if you will, every Tuesday. Right now, however, I foresee that'll probably expand. So you can get that on Apple or Spotify, or go to iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov. So our first couple episodes are live. There's an intro, and then the first one was with Governor Reynolds. So thank you, and excited to be here, Michael.
And the name of that podcast again is?
Yeah, just search Mission Employable.
Okay. They don't need to put it in Iowa first or something.
I don't think so, no. Okay. So you'll see it. It pulls up pretty quickly if you put that in.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you all for being here this morning. So I have a question for everyone, and we can go around with this. It's a general open-ended question. I admit it's an open-ended question. How have things changed in the hiring landscape in the past year? I can only speak from what I say. March 8, as we all know, was the 1-year anniversary of Iowa's first confirmed case of COVID-19, and that set off a bunch of things. And as we all know, in several parts of the state, we had that storm on August 10 that did not help in any way. So what do you see? Bethany, what do you see? Tell us what you see.
I think one of the biggest things coming out of this is how do we integrate that culture? We always talk about that at our firm, that, it's a work hard, play hard mentality, and, really feeling like you are part of a team. But onboarding, how do you get your new team members to adapt when part of us are still at home, part are in the office? So I think that's one of the big challenges. And then also looking at that work-life spectrum. And I think that was a trend that was coming regardless. But then obviously the past year has just accelerated that. So I think those are two of the key areas that we have seen from Des Moines anyway.
Okay. John, what do you think? What are you seeing from, because you're with the Bankers Association, you're with the Iowa Business Council, so you should have a 3,000-foot view, right?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, and Ryan would be able to recite these percentages, but if you look at overall for our state, where we started out back, this time of year, a year ago, and where we're back to, the state has actually recovered fairly nicely. We now have a 3.5% unemployment rate. Ryan, we all know that impacted certain segments of our economy much more significantly than others. Especially leisure and hospitality, our restaurants. Part of what our industry has been doing has been providing paycheck protection loans to those small businesses who are really struggling. I never want to minimize the trauma that our small businesses and others have gone through during this year of COVID. But you do have to credit kind of our state for the way we've managed through it and been able to keep people employed. And frankly, that's part of what the Paycheck Protection Program was to keep people on the payroll. So, from an overall perspective, that's great news. It sounds like it might hurt us a little bit on the new stimulus bill and with the percent of allocation we get for state and local governments. But at the end of the day, as long as we can keep people employed, that is a good thing. The other thing we've experienced in the mortgage, in our industry, in the banking industry, is with the low rate environment, the mortgage area has really been, really taken off and been a record year in almost all, any way you can measure it. And that's been a good thing for Iowans because they've been able to lower their debt service costs when it comes to housing. But at the same time, from an employment standpoint, that's made it very difficult. That's an area we've had a very great difficulty finding people, underwriters, processors, to keep to help us in those areas. So, it's had an uneven effect on the economy and our employment activity. But I think, overall, we have to feel pretty good about how our state has weathered it.
And when you say it's been a great year for mortgages, John, you mean more, just sheer quantity? Yes?
Sheer volume. Obviously, with rates dropping, 2% on a 15-year mortgage is pretty much unheard of. And so a number of Iowans refinanced mortgage loans during that time period. And so all the mortgage shops were extremely busy for 2020 and now even into 2021.
Right, and those rates are starting to creep back up a little bit, aren't they?
They are starting to creep back up a little bit, and probably will throughout the year. But we hope that's a very slow climb.
Okay, Jason, what do you think, sir?
I think I'd like to build on to something that Bethany said, which is I think one of the biggest changes we've seen over the last year is that it took a couple of trends that we'd already seen starting to gradually move, which is more automation in employment and remote work. And we just accelerated that tremendously in a way that we weren't prepared for, or that businesses probably weren't quite ready, wouldn't have been otherwise willing or able to do, without it being forced by necessity. So it's caused a lot of disruption with just what we basically thought of as kind of normal operating of how our businesses work. It's also put a huge premium on organizations that that can figure out how to do that well, and especially managing remotely, because we've really had this reckoning about which positions or which kinds of jobs or which industries can be operated remotely and which can't, and which people and managers can operate in that environment effectively and which struggle with it. So I think I think those are some of the conversations that we've been having last year, that remote work has been kind of a steady incremental change over the last 20 years, but it hasn't really been a preponderance of it. And now suddenly it is the majority of things. And now we're trying to figure out when we can, get back to whatever normal looks like. Where's that pendulum going to settle? Because we know it's not going to be like it was pre-pandemic. It's probably not going to be as much as it was in the middle of it. So where is that land, and which employers are able to, to be successful with that new model?
Can you talk a little bit, Jason, about this managing remotely? Because I'll tell you, a year and a week ago, the Gazette was in this giant old building in downtown Cedar Rapids. And then suddenly we were moving out. I've been here in my house since then. We, in fact, then determined a number of things. We did not need to be in that large building. We're now in a much smaller building. At least boxes of my stuff are, and my nameplate is there. And there's a monitor with my name on it there. And I go in there occasionally. And it's very different, particularly for us. I can't stand up and turn around and say, look, there's a reporter, there's a photographer, I need you to go do something now. We have Slack, we have Zoom, we have Google Docs, we have Trello. We have a lot of things. We have text. They have this phone that never leaves my hand. Surely I'm not the only one, with this. So yeah, exactly. So what are you hearing from supervisors and managers, Jason? How are they coping?
Yeah, well, you mentioned one, which I'm probably not as qualified to speak on, which is what this means for commercial real estate and how we reconcile the physical space of work, and what that's going to mean going forward. I think that's true of businesses and schools and all kinds of things, especially in higher ed. I think there's going to be a lot of reckoning around that. From the workplace in particular, I think it really speaks to how much of that human connection do we need, right? We know that a big part of retention and a big part of employee engagement in a workforce is the relationship between their direct supervisor and the employee, right? So, and the dynamics where that mostly got developed, that trust and that relationship happened in a workplace and in a physical location where you could do management by walking around and you could spend time with somebody in small talk, and that's how you built trust, right? So, but those dynamics have changed considerably, and so even though there are ways to do that remotely, they're much more of a challenge. And getting employees, for instance, to say, well, you're already spending many hours a day on Zoom, but now we have to do another thing for social hour because that's how we build trust and relationships, is very difficult, because I don't want to spend any more time on Zoom than I have to, because it can be exhausting. But we're missing out on a lot of the things that had previously built, the human cohesion that happens that actually makes organizations run effectively. So because we're not machines, we can't just be turned on and off, and trust isn't built by, having an effective meeting over Zoom and getting out of there as quickly as we can. So how do we figure that out, I think, is going to be a real challenge, because I think as much as I think I see things, people saying, well, now everybody's going to be working remotely because you can work from anywhere. We're also realizing there's a lot of places where that's just not as successful, or there's people that are not as successful when they can't be around other human beings, and we still need that personal connection. And our technology tools are great, but it's still not a replacement for face-to-face interaction.
So Claudia, what are you seeing here the day after the Ides of March, year one of pandemic?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Michael. I have been pondering on this for a while, and based on everything we're seeing, hearing, and reading, we have understood that virtually recruiting and onboarding a remote workforce are here to stay. I don't think, to a certain degree, people are going to give up on the ability to continue to work with a remote workforce. What we have been hearing from a lot of our clients is that, yes, to what Jason mentioned, people are ready to go back to the workplace. They need that teamwork and be in the office. But there are a lot of our clients that are telling us, I don't need to go back to the office. So I think we're going to have a hybrid approach to the workplace moving forward. What we have seen as well is how quickly organizations had to adapt, not only to how to do things differently, but also adapt to technology. And I think that's also going to stay here for a long time. As Jason mentioned, automating certain aspects of your processes just so you can have a broader reach and you can have the flexibility is definitely going to make a huge difference for small and bigger businesses.
Along with the cost equation.
Along with the cost, right?
Yes. So Ryan, you're at Workforce Development. You're at the state. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everybody said. I could kind of touch on all of it. I think the remote job is the biggest thing for us. Just we see it from both sides. So we forget sometimes that we are trying to hire people for our agency. So we go through the same pain points as everybody else does as well. We actually added a remote job tab to our website on iowaworks.gov, and there's over 500 jobs out there. The question will become over the next year, what kind of data do we have? I also think that those remote jobs will maybe help keep some people in our rural communities, which is such a big deal. 88 of those 99 counties are losing population every year. And so anything we can do to help those entities as well. You have to look at it from two standpoints. So all we've really wanted to talk about is unemployment insurance, which is fantastic, but also gets very exhausting. And so through the midst of the entire pandemic, we've had this enormous job opportunity still. And what happens through this adversity is, you get these opportunities in other segments. So we've consistently been around 70,000 jobs on our job board. I believe this morning we're still over 70,000. Many of those are career paths. So to answer your question, from a standpoint of what we're trying to do is look for any way we can to communicate with people in different avenues. I never thought I'd see the day where Iowa Workforce Development would be working remotely, but we've been doing it. And oh, by the way, with the biggest workloads we've ever had. So the key for us is kind of to Claudia's point is how will we maintain that going forward? I think remote working isn't for obviously every industry, but it's also a good way to reduce your employee turnover. We've seen some pretty dramatic things with remote, just from what it does from a standpoint of people's personal life. And so that'll be the barometer for us moving forward.
Okay. So we know, and you mentioned it, Ryan, that we have some population declines in significant portions of the state.
Yep.
And when we do interviews for jobs, we hear the same things. I'm sure everybody does from people in their 20s. They mention Denver, they mention Chicago. It's the same. Boston, right? They want beaches, they want mountains, they want culture, they want these things. How do we sell Iowa? How do we say no? You really want to? This is a good place. Mm-hmm. I'm going to open that to whoever wants to address that.
Mike, I think I just maybe flip the table on that one. To some degree, that probably opens up workforce that we hadn't even considered before, right? I mean, remote workers can be anywhere. So, I mean, Iowa's always had the issue of finding workers, finding talent, and attracting people to our state. But now, for many jobs, people can live and work from anywhere. That's not the ideal for us. We love people who live in Iowa and be a part of our communities and create the fabric of our state, which is so very important. But it does create a broader workforce. It allows us to diversify our workforce probably more than we're able to by looking locally. So there are some positives to it.
Wouldn't that mean, though, if you could live anywhere, and if you could get a job anywhere you want, wouldn't you work for a company that's, I don't know, on the West Coast that probably pays more?
Well, I'll jump in on this one because I think it's both a threat and an opportunity, right? I mean, having recruited people here for a long time, one of the big hurdles to getting people to move to Iowa was well, if I move there for this job, and if for that doesn't work out, there's what other jobs are there? I want to be in big population centers where there's lots of other opportunity, and I have options, right? So that, with remote work, that goes away. I can live in a tiny town of 500 people in Iowa, and I can work for anybody from that one spot. So I think there's an opportunity to be able to sell, all the things that we've always known about Iowa that are great with our quality of life and lower cost of living and some of those things, and say you can live here and you can still work for, your options are still as open as they were in some very large metropolitan area or very large city. And by the way, you get to do that for a heck of a lot cheaper than you did when you were living in Chicago or Manhattan, right?
Yeah, and I think to build on what Jason just said about the cost of living, there's also how easy it is to live in Iowa, that, you can go to Broadway shows and concerts once those are all happening again. You can easily get tickets for those kinds of things. So there are those opportunities. I oftentimes like to say that in Iowa, it's, well, Des Moines anyway, the biggest small town, the smallest big city. But I think that is applicable for all of our communities, is you have the opportunity to get to know your neighbors, that true sense of community, which I think is so important for those social connections for long-term community success. But then you also have some of those opportunities that I just mentioned. But at the same time, we have to address those challenges. So housing, which may be counterintuitive to believe that every single Iowa community has a housing issue, but issues of quality, of quantity are huge issues. Those amenities, being able to get outside. I think we've seen the importance of open space and trails, especially in the last year, for your emotional as well as your physical well-being, looking at schools, broadband, arts, all of those different pieces. And even in our smaller communities, They're going to be smaller scale amenities than they are in Cedar Rapids or Des Moines, but people want those same amenities regardless of where they live.
Okay. I think another thing it's really interesting about it is that it looks like we could see a decoupling between business recruitment and employee recruitment, with this kind of thing too. So I mean, so now with remote work, we can recruit or promote people to move here as a workforce when that business isn't even necessarily located here, right? So because it used to be, well, we had to get a business to move here and open a location so we could attract people to work in that physical location. Well, if remote work is the thing, then and you can work from anywhere. Well, it's moot of where that physical location, where that company is headquartered in. So we could attract a workforce for a company that's located several states away, but their workforce is all here because this is where they want to live. So there's an opportunity there if we can sell all the other parts of living here is great, and getting those folks here for all those other reasons why we know that Iowa is great and why we live here.
Claudia, it looks like you're going to jump in there.
Yes, thank you. I'm just reflecting on what Bethany and Jason are saying, and I think that applies to some employees, but I can also see some employees not wanting to leave their hometowns and still working for a company here in Iowa, that's where I think the remote workforce plays out even more in a more exciting context, I think. Can you imagine people working from LA or New York and contributing to our bottom line here? I think that's exciting. However, it's only exciting to companies that really have their work aligned toward the future of work and expectations of talent. Organizations that are not willing to do things differently or even to take stock of what's working or not working when recruiting the workforce, I think they're going to get stuck and not going to take advantage of this huge pool of candidates all of a sudden. So I think it's important to incentivize companies to, one, audit your own processes, see what you're doing well, make sure that you use this time to really understand what's needed in the future and change accordingly, because that's when you're going to be better equipped to take advantage of the remote workforce moving forward.
So what would you say, and I want to, before we get too far along, because we're almost at the halfway mark, remind people watching, you can ask questions. Please do so through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and they will make their way to us. So, Claudia, I wanted to, if you could follow up on that. So this workforce that we want to attract living wherever they're living, or they live here and they're working elsewhere, what do they want? What do they want these days? I mean, you keep reading about how corporate culture is important, which is hard to determine during a job interview. What do you see? What do you think?
So I think like any great talents, you're going to want a premium from their employers. They're still will want to be compensated well. But besides that, employees are looking for organizations that are meeting their life goals, their expectations for a balance between home and work life. So there are many different things that I think employers should be thinking about when it comes to that. But I think more importantly, Michael, for me is we have seen in 2020 how things have taken a shift, and more employees are now even asking or demanding in some instances their employers take a stance when talking about inclusivity, even social justice. I think can also be said when we talk about environmental justice, when we talk about some other issues that are important to them. So I can see that as a trend moving forward, that employees are going to be joining organizations that are being very bold and telling them upfront what they stand for and how they actually demonstrate that commitment. And I think, again, some things might not be relevant to all of us, but there's always a group of people that are really want to hear those commitments upfront before making a decision to move or to work for a company remotely.
Bethany, you seem to be in agreement with that. I saw you nodding.
Yeah, one thing I've been thinking is really that alignment with personal values and corporate values. I think especially for the millennials, Gen Z, that has become even more important. And then just those opportunities for continued growth of, what is that career trajectory, and making sure that there are those opportunities at a company. You're investing a lot of your life with the company, so making sure that you see a long-term path there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we get, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I do think that, as you talked about, there's going to be a very increased competition. So I think with the advantage that some companies have had, especially if you're larger, have an established presence in a physical location, is that you had some inertia with that. Like, I know that I've got some retention advantage because it takes a lot for somebody to leave and move, or to relocate, or to do those things. I mean, that's a big leap, right? Well, when I don't have to leave or move, and all I have to do is I just get a different link to a different Zoom meeting that, from my organization, then the competition becomes less about your physical space and just keeping you here and relocating. Now the competition is, where do I really want to work, and what organizations really reflect my values, and where am I going to get great leadership and mentorship? And so all the and those things have always been important, but now it's much easier to make those decisions based solely on that without some other complicating factors.
Yeah, I would just maybe add to that too. Since I'm clearly the elder statesman on this group, I would say a lot of things haven't changed. I mean, many things have changed dramatically. A few things haven't. One, you want to work at a company that has a positive culture, and you have people with high character who do the right things. You want a good work-life balance. I think most of us have wanted that during our career, and you want to work somewhere that does something that matters, that makes a difference in the lives of the people you serve. So I think those are three things that never change.
Before I let you go, John, so we have a question. Thank you, by the way, those of you watching using the Q&A box. John, I think we'll start with you with this. One of our viewers, audience members, asks, I work for a manufacturing facility. Working remotely isn't an option. Are there strategies for that type of business? And I think he does mean it from the business perspective. I mean, what do they do? Because you've got to have meat processing, Amana, Whirlpool. People got to come in and work there. Quaker.
Thanks for giving me the easy question, Michael.
You had the floor.
I mean, clearly there are going to be some positions, some jobs where remote working is just not going to work, right? I mean, you need the team there. You need to be able to collaborate. Frankly, I think it's really important for young people just starting out in the working world to have the ability to have a mentor. And you don't develop those mentorships unless you're face-to-face with people. I know in our industry, my goodness, people are dying to get back together to share best practices and maybe give somebody a hug, heaven forbid, and build those personal relationships. So kind of an aside on that, but clearly from a manufacturing standpoint, I guess there are options there in regards to how you conduct that process, which may change things a little bit. I don't know if there's a hybrid model there that works or not, but I would suggest they're going to have to emphasize more the culture, making their employees feel like they are contributing to an important product here for our economy, and kind of building that sense of community within that manufacturing environment. So yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah, I can take it from where John had it too. So we've talked about this a lot. I think one of the things that, first of all, I saw that question come through, and one of the things we're really trying to do with the podcast is promote manufacturing, and it's the state's biggest, industry. I think one of the things manufacturing plants have, manufacturers, it's not manufacturing of 20 years ago. These are some really high-tech entities. Marketing what they're doing through social media is one outlet. I think if you look at what some of these other companies are doing on like on Instagram, they're just putting videos and pictures of what they do and making it more kind of, engaging to the age group they're going after. That's one thing that can help. I also think obviously connecting with your high schools, and we're certainly part of that as well, trying to help create pipelines Again, it depends on what age group you're going for, but you know, the opportunities in manufacturing are immense, and they're going to be enormous over the next 10 years. So if you go out and look at Instagram, again, I don't mean to turn this into a social media thing, but if you go out and look at Instagram and you look at a company like Wendy's, okay, just Wendy's, and look at how they market and the following they get from the stupid stuff they post and the engagement, that's what I'm talking about for manufacturing. How do you make manufacturing engaging to that age group you're going after? And it's not tough, or it's not always easy, but it's a starting point anyway.
Okay, is this where I dropped the anecdote? How about when I lived in Columbus, I used to know Wendy. Okay, yeah. we can save that, but it's true. All right, so here's a question, and I think I know where this question's going, and we'll see. When encouraging people to come to Iowa, what has been the impact, if any, of legislation coming from the Golden Dome of Wisdom? And I think this means any sort of tax legislation. It could also be referring to, one could argue, Iowa is becoming more red and less blue, less purple. Do you see that having any effect? Does anybody want to touch that? It's a legit question for hiring, particularly if you're talking about people who want to go, you know, it's Claudia, you talk about they want culture, and Bethany, you talk about they want, you know, the big city. Well, is that what we have? And I'm not making any political statement here at all, but have you heard any discussion about that?
Well, I'll say I think it's an interesting trend. I mean, so it's always been true that, you know, where you want to live and where you want, you know, where you want to raise your family or be part of a community, at the political environment and the policies that are passed at a legislative level absolutely have an impact on that, right? So as that changes or shifts, that's, you know, there are going to be people that make different decisions based on that. And I think that's accelerating now, not just because of remote workforce, but just because our politics in general has become such more a open topic of conversation than it used to be. So, I mean, I think, but even in my, you know, employment history, 20 years ago, you hardly ever talked in the office about who you voted for or debated politics other than a couple of local things or a policy that might have impacted your business in particular, or that was of particular note. And that has become much more of a pervasive part of our culture. It's in our workplaces now. So I think we see a lot more people starting to choose workplace cultures and organizations choosing employees, I think, to some extent, or, you know, based on a political affiliation or viewpoint or those kind of things too. So to the extent that our politics and our, whether at the state level, the local or national level, drives some of those conversations, it has a much greater impact on, I think, on organizations and where people want to work and which employers want to have work for them.
You're saying they're mutually selecting the job candidate and the companies, maybe?
I think we see more of that. It's not unlike some of our communities as well. So I think we are, or in social media, is that we tend to gravitate more towards people that agree with us, or agree with our, and there's some confirmation bias there. And I think we're starting to see that in many aspects of life, and the workplace and organizations are not immune to that.
So we're talking a lot about, okay, companies need to promote this and they need to do this and they need to do that to attract people. And John, I'm going to put you on the spot again because you are with the Iowa Business Council. And I know that the IBC puts out that survey periodically, regularly. And what is the sentiment? What is the business sentiment for all this notion? And that's an investment, you know, how you promote yourself and where you position yourself. Yes. And what you look for.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of interest in being more aggressive in marketing in Iowa. Now that needs to be very targeted to areas where we have had success in the past, and attracting people to our state who don't typically come to Iowa. I mean, we need to be more creative on how we're looking to attract talent to our state. And we have a lot of great things to sell. I mean, I think we all touched on that earlier, right? The quality of life, the cost of living, the short commute, although I guess with remote working that goes off the table for a few. So I think continued emphasis on marketing our state is I know the Business Council, along with our public leaders, agree that's something we need to do more of. I don't know if I got to exactly your question or not. But.
Yeah.
And I, just maybe tag on a little bit to politics, and I'd be very careful with that. But
sure,
I think we all know that the fringes of both parties is where we see some of these ideas that maybe don't leave a good impression. So in this day and age, those seem to be the issues that get the most attention, even though there's some very good work being done in the middle and moderate.
In the middle.
In the middle, yeah.
Yeah.
As small as it may be, there's some very good work being done there.
And that's why we live here. So before we leave this part of it, so we talk about recruiting and how important is, and this is not, it sounds like a trick question and it isn't. How important is recruiting for diversity these days still? Is that still a thing? Is it important? Why is it important? Claudia, not to lead you.
I'll jump in there. Let me just make a comment regarding the question from our attendee. And again, Schabel Solutions is a nonpartisan organization. We are very grateful for all of our legislators for serving. It's not an easy job. With that said, we did see at least 3 bills that could be detrimental to inclusivity and detrimental to the sentiment that we're all in it together. And that is concerning from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, but also the ability of the state to brand itself as inclusive. For people that don't live here, they don't know, they just see the headlines. And that is where I think it could impact people's ability to recruit, people's ability to recruit even business partners. So that was concerning for us. Now, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, things have been expedited in 2020 after George Floyd's killing and the social upheaval that we have been seeing in the protests around social justice. We saw an increase in the demands for our services when it comes to not only consulting around how to attract, but also how to retain diverse talent, and also how to build inclusive workplaces. We have not seen that interest go down at all in Q1. If anything, I think it will sustain itself throughout 2021. We also think that diversity, equity, and inclusion will continue to be a priority for attraction retention teams. So specifically, the recruiters are going to be on the front lines. There is a LinkedIn survey that was conducted, I think, in Q4 of 2020, and assessed that there is more focus now in talent acquisition teams to consult with hiring managers on how to interview a diverse pool of candidates and how to continuously build a diverse pipeline of talent. I don't think that's any new. It's not new for many companies. They have been doing that for a long, long time, but it is brand new for smaller businesses. It's brand new for some organizations. So there is a learning curve that will come with that. But I think the focus is how do we ensure that the individuals that are in the state of Iowa that have the ability to work for us and with us can have a fair shot and get an opportunity to be interviewed. So I think there'll be more focus on that for sure moving forward.
I think there's also the opportunity with seeing the number of diversity, equity, and inclusion committees or teams pop up at many companies. I think it's imperative that those are actually moving forward with meaningful work and that a company is not just paying it lip service. I think, we'll lose a lot of credibility as companies if that is the case. Seeing that ongoing commitment in the long term, seeing it integrated in all facets from hiring to day-to-day operations to project delivery. All of those different pieces, I think, again, the younger generations especially are demanding that is included and is a holistic part of the workplace. And then I would also add with our communities, with 900 plus communities in Iowa, with our population woes, we have to be diverse and welcoming if we want those communities to continue to be around. I mean, we're seeing so many communities decline, and the usual suspects, so to speak, are not the ones that are continuing to live there and grow that population. So we have to be diverse if we want to continue to grow.
I just add to something you said there too, is just that it's going to continue to be a huge deal because the candidates that are joining positions are demanding that it's a huge deal. So it really is kind of a supply and demand, problem, or what's the customer want. And if you want to attract, a good pool, if you want to attract talented people, those talented people are expecting that the organizations they join embrace those issues, and they are socially conscious, and that they are doing something that's for the greater good, and that they are embracing a more diverse workforce. And I see that I teach undergrads, and so and work with them and mentor some of them too. And I see that as a much higher on the priority list, and many more of them having it on the priority list than we've seen for a very long time, to say that is not only, it's a nice to have, it's a rock solid expectation that I'm not going to be a part of an organization that I don't see as excelling in embracing some of those values.
Okay, and following up from this, here comes a very pragmatic question. And you can see this, right? As some employers start to bring employees back to the office, what's that balance of team building, encouraging company culture through connecting, and respecting potential anxiety some employees might have with re-engaging? And I will tell you, before we got a lot of snow, I would occasionally meet with reporters who report to me, and we'd go to a coffee shop, and I'd pick a place that you could be outdoors or had big spaces so everybody could sit far apart. And there was still anxiety about that. And I don't think that's gone away a whole lot. So how do you figure that out? How do you bring people back, and how do you do that? How do you have team building? How do you do these things? And whether we're indoors or, I don't know, green square, how do we do that?
Well, I'll go first on this one. So that's a great question, and we're in a perfect example of that. So we're working remotely as an agency as well, and we're doing a phased-in approach. We just recently opened our Iowa Works offices up. Of course, there's one in Cedar Rapids, and as a skeleton crew. And so our goal, I think, obviously by this summer, we'll be back in office. I'm working from home too. I went into the office a couple of weeks ago, and it was kind of culture shock. So I understand the whole process. I think the approach we're taking is just in phased-in approaches, not trying to, do it all at once, slowly move those pieces into place. We're also asking our individual teams, managers, to do that with their teams. I think it probably takes the rest of the year, Michael. I know there's a lot of other entities that are actually that are back in or have been back in full capacity. I think the biggest thing for us is the balance of, and John kind of touched on this, the balance of just work life. The staff at Iowa Workforce Development have worked incredible hours, literally for a year now. So getting out of that is our first and foremost, most important thing, the overtime and the amount of time it's taken to process a lot of the unemployment stuff. But I don't know if we know, just like with remote jobs, we don't have enough data on that information yet, I don't think. So slow and steady is, I think, the approach we're taking.
And I think flexibility has been the key. I'm obviously at home. I would say my husband and I probably fall in the more cautious category, but it's flexibility. It's understanding where people are comfortable. I will say we built a patio in our front yard during the pandemic because we were getting together with our neighbors. So using that as an opportunity, it's a place that I feel comfortable, and I can have my coworkers over, we can socially distance and still talk and still connect. So I think that has been one of the biggest things. And I think coming out of this, if there's one thing that I hope is lasting, it's the grace and empathy. Everybody is doing the best they can, with challenging situations that we probably don't know half the story of. And so I think that's been the biggest thing for our company as a key to success.
I'd say it's a kind of question of how you do it. I saw one of the questions came through earlier about also asking how often do I check in with remote employees and how do I do those things too? I think they're very closely related. And this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but like most things with leadership, the answer is it depends, right? It depends on your organization. It depends on your people and what, and how you can do this logistically with your business and the industry that you're in, as well as what's the sentiment of the people in your organization, how they do this. And I think the key of that is that you have to be very intentional. have to be very intentional of thinking through as leaders of these organizations. How do we best do this? What does this mean for our folks? Getting a lot of feedback and having constant conversations. Because if you think that you can just kind of make a call and say, well, this is how it's going to work, or you can look to another organization and say, well, that's how they're doing it. That must be and it worked for them. That will work for us. That I think that is, is a recipe for disaster with some of those things. You really have to spend a lot more time than I think than you may think to really plan for how this is going to look and be able to adapt and all those kind of things. But you really have to know your organization, your people really well. And if you don't, then that's when you're going to get tripped up.
I'll jump in as well. I agree with what you said, Jason, but I love what you said, Bethany, in terms of flexibility and understanding that flexibility leads to equitable practices. We have seen in 2020 that equity plays a key role in making sound decisions for your staff. So asking, assessing, and understanding how to differentiate and not to make people feel guilty or even create the sense of you are special. No, we all need different things, and understanding that and carrying that through to engage your talent is going to be key in 2021. From a recruiting perspective, we also have seen that in 2021, according to the LinkedIn and the Society for Human Resource Management survey, there is more opportunities for internal mobility. So we're also seeing that companies are looking inward and saying, what talent can I develop? What talent can I help grow in order to fulfill some of our needs? And I think flexibility also applies to that. Sometimes we think you need to have extra experience in this area or 10 plus years of experience. Well, how do you transfer that flexibility into how you're assessing your talent as well?
Okay, and we have a follow-up question. Suggestions for enticing employees to come back to work, and that's what the caveat, we want them to come back into work. Well, this means come back to work as employers. I got it. How we're enticing employees to come back to work with unemployment benefits and stimulus money being so available. I think we may have seen the last of the stimulus money, but I'm not sure. But that's a question I've heard a lot. John?
Yeah, well, we have the second round, or what are we on, third round?
Third, yeah.
Headed out as we speak. So there will be additional monies. And, again, many of those are going to people who are in dire need. So it's important. But the unemployment situation with the additional federal unemployment on top of at the state level, that's just going to depend on the employer and the environment that they have, whether or not we can get those people back. Now, eventually, all of these programs, we think, at the end of the day, are going to roll off, right? I mean, they're no longer going to be there. They were to help us get to the other side of the pandemic, and again, many of them were so important in doing that. But I think 2021 is just going to be a year, and many of our commenters or panelists have mentioned this. It's going to be a year of transition where you're just going to have to be flexible. And do what you can, obviously, to encourage those people to come back to work will certainly be important, but we'll get there. It's just going to be a transition year.
So what you're all saying, if I've got this right, correct me, 2021, like 2020, is uncharted. The difference is we didn't know it in 2020, what was going to be happening. We do now, and we just have to keep figuring it out as we go along. Is that what we're saying? With some
I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I think even if we could wave a magic wand and tomorrow there was no pandemic concerns anymore, and we were and there were all those restrictions, all those things were off, right? The last year has taught us many things and shown a lot of people what's possible in a lot of ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. So even if tomorrow that all ended like a cliff, it's not like we revert back to March 7th of last year and that work environment that has forever been changed. So, and we know that it's not going to happen overnight, right? So, but that transition time over is next year. So whenever, because we know this is going to be a gradual thing. We know this isn't going to be like, okay, it's all clear, everybody can go back to where they're doing. It's going to be in stages. So the good thing about that is that allows us to figure that out as we go and incrementally figure out what that looks like for each organization and do those kind of things too. The tough thing is that it's also uncertain, and there's going to be continued uncertainty about how we kind of ferret that out. But at least going back to work, we'll have some time to think through how that looks as we get more and more, as opposed to a year ago where it was 2 weeks and we did drop off a cliff.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, Jason, is, my goodness, what an exciting time. I mean, really, when you think about it, right? We're moving, the vaccinations are taking hold. A larger percentage of our population is being vaccinated. We might be moving towards herd immunity pretty quickly here. A great deal of optimism, frankly, for the second half of this year. I know from our standpoint, our members are very well positioned with the amount of deposits they have to help our Iowans reinvest, start a new business, buy a new home, whatever direction they want to take. And I think if things continue on the path we're headed, there's just going to be second half of 21 is going to be, could be a lot of fun. I mean, I think there could be a lot of economic activity in Iowa. There could be a lot of employment, and we need to do what we can to help facilitate that.
I think it depends on what kind of fun, if I can take any more fun. But yes, we'll see. Okay, we got 4 minutes left. Pop quiz. We're going to go around the room. I did not tell you about this question. So come September 2021, do you forecast, with all you've seen and all you hear, will many companies have their employees back in an office or in a work environment? September. So that's 6 months from now.
I think so. I'll go first. I think there'll be a greater percentage. I think so. I think, as I agree with what everybody said, I think that 2021, everybody's ready for a mask burning, if you will, to enjoy the summer and get back into some normalcy. I just think that there's going to be changes to that back in office, where people might be back in office and remote on a more normal basis. So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. I think we'll see more people in the office, but lots of hybrid still. And I think that's going to be ongoing beyond 2021.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that as well. I think the hybrid model will be more popular than ever.
Yeah, I think one of the lasting things we'll see out of this is that there'll be a lot more flexibility and willingness on employers to not, expect that your derriere is sitting in a chair in your building from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. But I do think that I think one of the things that we've missed and we've realized that is of real value is human interaction and the ability to build a sense of community, and that can only be done when we're sitting in the same physical location, and again, and that. So I do think we'll see a swing back to that, and by September is my hope as well.
Yeah, we're moving our 220 employees into a new office building on September 1. So we will be back together and taking advantage of all of the things that brings with it.
So you plan on everyone being in there at the same time?
We do.
How many people would that be?
220.
Yowza. Okay. All right. I want to thank our panelists this morning. I know your time is busy. You've got things. I appreciate your being here. From left to right, Bethany, Claudia, John, Jason, Ryan, thank you very much for your time. Ryan, what's the name of that podcast one more time that launches today?
Thank you, Michael. Mission Employable. Encourage everybody, follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see it maybe ad nauseum there, but we'll be promoting it out a lot. So thank you. Okay, so thanks for all of you who watched this live. It is being recorded, so we'll be on the Gazette website, thegazette.com, probably later today. I want to thank Chelsea and Sharon for sending the calls along and the emails and the questions. Our next business panel for the Gazette on the power grid of the future will be June 8th. We'll have more information on that.
join us, won't you? And thank you.